What's going on, y'all? We're back. UFC 305 wrapped up this weekend, and I'm not going to lie, this card absolutely delivered. I think it's probably maybe the third best card of the year so far. Obviously, 300 was better. You can argue 299 was better, but I mean, 305 over-delivered. The main event was great. The Dan Hooker fight was great. Are y'all feeling that? Are y'all feeling this Dan Hooker title run? Like, is that what's happening right now? We got Dan Hooker back in the top 5 of the rankings. I'm not going to lie, that's crazy. But let's go ahead and look at the next fights the UFC should make following UFC 305. Starting off with the champion, Dricus Du Plessis. This one's going to be controversial, but I think DDP should fight Hamza Chimaev next. And I know Hamza Chimaev has a fight coming up with Robert Whitaker in October, but this is where y'all got to hear me out. If Chimaev goes out there and beats Robert Whitaker, which I do think is going to happen, sadly, Hamza Chimaev has to be next for the title shot. I know there's a lot of Strickland fans out there that are crying and think that he needs to be next. But, I mean, he is coming off of one win against Costa. Even if Robert Whitaker goes out there and wins, he has a way better claim to the title than Sean Strickland would. Whitaker would even have a win over Costa in better fashion. He would have knocked out Ikram in the first round and then have a win over Hamza Chimaev. I just think Sean Strickland's kind of being a baby about it. I don't think he's handling the situation the best way because I do think he probably will get passed up. As y'all can probably tell, I'm not really a Sean Strickland fan. I just don't really love his fight style, and I would be 100 times more hyped for a fight with DDP and Hamza Chimaev than DDP Strickland too. The fight was pretty good though, very close fight. Some people say it was a robbery. I don't think it was a robbery. It was very, very close fight. But yeah, I think Hamza Chimaev is going to go out there and beat Robert Whitaker, and I think the winner of that fight should 100% be next over Sean Strickland. I know Dana has said that Sean Strickland will be next, but Dana likes to change his mind. We'll have to see how everything plays out. But the UFC has been wanting to book Hamza Chimaev for a title fight ever since he entered the UFC. If they get an opportunity to do it, let's do it. So maybe sometime next year, DDP versus Hamza Chimaev, maybe do Sean Strickland as the backup fighter because it's pretty likely that Hamza Chimaev does not make the fight. But anyway, I think Chimaev will be and should be next for the title. But let's move on to the loser of the main event, my personal favorite fighter, Israel Adesanya. I think he should fight Robert Whitaker 3, assuming Robert Whitaker loses to Hamza Chimaev. Now, if Robert Whitaker wins against Hamza, I think this fight doesn't really make sense. And y'all might think it doesn't make sense regardless, but I know Robert Whitaker wants this fight back. I think the UFC doesn't really want Izzy to fight a lower-ranked contender. I thought about maybe the winner of Imavov and Brendan Allen, but is the UFC really going to book Israel Adesanya versus a Brendan Allen or a Nasruddin Imavov? I think Izzy's too big of a star to drop him down to a lower ranked guy. Unless they have a big name or lots of hype behind them, then maybe I could see it. But I know Robert Whitaker really wants this fight back. He knows he can beat Izzy. He wants to beat Izzy before he retires. I think this would be a banger fight, maybe a co-main event to a, Volkanovski title shot. I know it. I'm coping. I still have faith in Izzy. I still have faith in Kamaru Usman. I still have faith in Alexander Volkanovski. And I know I'm crazy. I think they all could still potentially be champion one day. And they're all 1-3 in their last 4. But it doesn't matter because Izzy, Usman, and Volk are all going to be champions once again by the end of 2025. Okay, now I'm definitely coping. But yeah, I think you run Israel Adesanya maybe early next year against the loser of Chimaev and Whitaker. I could see him potentially fighting Sean Strickland, but I don't think Sean's going to want to do that. He said he wants to wait around for a title shot, and I believe him. So there's potential there maybe for Izzy versus Strickland, a non-title fight. But then again, Izzy doesn't really deserve that fight. And I know realistically Izzy should be a few fights away from another title shot, but I don't think the UFC really cares. Izzy's a massive star. They might only have him win one more big fight and put him back in there again, maybe a rematch with DDP or whoever the champion is. On top of that, if Chimaev is champion by then, they've been wanting to do Israel Adesanya versus Hamza Chimaev for the longest time. 2 massive stars of the sport. That would be huge. You can't tell me you would not be excited to see that. With that being said, I think Hamza Chimaev would smash my boy. If Dricus can take his back like that and sink in the choke, I don't think Chimaev's going to have too much trouble with it. But yeah, I want to see Izzy versus Whitaker 3, maybe in New Zealand, maybe an Australia event again sometime next year. I think it'd be sick. But let's move on to the next fighter up. We got Kai Kara-France. This one was kind of tough for me, but I think Kai Kara-France should fight Alexandre Pantoja next. I know there's been rumors of Pantoja versus Asakara, the guy from Rosen from Japan. I don't know if that fight's happening or not. Obviously, if it does, Kai Kara-France will probably fight someone else. Kai Kara said he wants to fight by the end of the year. Pantoja wants to fight by the end of the year. Let's make this fight happen. There's no true number one contender in this weight class right now. And I know people aren't going to like this one because Kaikar France was coming off a loss going into that fight with Erceg. But let's be real, he beat Amir Albazi. That was a robbery. But yeah, I think he should fight for the title next if they don't do Kaya Sakara versus Pantoja, which I wouldn't be too mad about just because he's a big star coming over from Japan. But I think Kaikar France versus Alexandre Pantoja should be next. Maybe book it in like December, January, possibly even on that John Jones card. But yeah, I think this fight makes sense to me. Y'all might not love it, but let's move on to Steve Erceg. Michael Scott got KO'd, man. Bedtime MMA got KO'd. Whatever you want to call him, he got KO'd. Very sad to see. But I want to see this man get back in there and beat up a guy like Manel Kape. I love Steve Erceg. I think this is actually a winnable fight for him. I think Manel Kape is one of the most overrated fighters in that division and honestly in the whole entire UFC. And no, I'm not just saying that because he lost to Muhammad Mokaev. Mokaev is a great fighter. Wish the UFC kept on to him. But Manel Kape really just is not that good. Obviously, he has power to put your lights out. And I don't want to see Erceg get dropped again. But I think this is a winnable fight for my man. I was actually really confident Steve Erceg was going to beat Kaikar France. I thought Astro Boy was going to go out there, get the job done, maybe compete for a title again next year. But now he got KO'd. We're back to square one. But I think you throw him in there with a guy like Manel Kape. I think Manel Kape's ranked somewhere like 8, 9, 10, somewhere around there. And if Steve Erceg were to get a win like this, he's pushing back up towards the top 5. So I don't mind this matchup. Let's move on to the next fighter. The man that stole the show, honestly, Dan Hooker. I want to see Dan Hooker fight Justin Gaethje. This is a banger matchup. We've never seen it before. 2 guys that just absolutely love to fight. 2 guys that probably have CTE. He looks like a bot here, I'm not going to lie. I'm glad he spent his VC. He spent all his V-Bucks, upgraded his character. But he just looks like a whole new fighter now. He said he was a whole new fighter coming into this fight. And he looks like it. And I know people are going to act like Gamrot's really not that good, but he is. He's a great wrestler, very hard to defend takedowns against him. That's a great win for Dan Hooker. We might actually be getting a Dan Hooker title run. I'm all here for it. Make him fight a guy like Justin Gaethje coming off a KO loss. Both guys could really use this win to jump into title conversations. And you know, possibly if Dan Hooker wins this fight, we get the highly anticipated rematch. Dan Hooker versus Islam Makhachev. And this time around, I think there's a really good chance Dan Hooker might make it into round 2. No, I'm kidding. But people are saying Dan Hooker is the new Charles Oliveira. I think that fits perfect. I could even see him fighting a guy like Charles Oliveira. But as a Charlie Olives fan, I hope they book him for an interim title. If they happen to do an interim title. Charles versus Armand 2. So let's do Dan Hooker versus Justin Gaethje. 2 BMFs of the sport. I mean, I'm not going to lie, this fight would be a banger. Let's move on to the last fighter on my list. We got Jairzinho Rozenstruik coming off a decision victory against Taito Ivasa. I think he's got to fight Derek Lewis, bro. I've been wanting to see this fight for so long. Literally 2 copy and paste of each other. It's basically Derek Lewis versus Derek Lewis. One of them would probably go out cold, and we wouldn't even know which one it was. Biggie Boy versus the Black Beast. It doesn't make all the sense in the world, but as a fan, I want to see this so bad. We just see 2 shiny bald heads just going at it, throwing haymakers at each other. Realistically, Jairzinho should probably fight a guy like Marcin Tybura, maybe Sergey Spivak, Pavlovich or something. But you know what? We don't want to see that. We really want to see Derek Lewis versus Jairzinho Rozenstruik. I'm not going to lie, this would be one of the funniest fights of all time. And I would hope this fight would not go to decision because it would be pretty impossible to score. But that's going to do it for me. Y'all let me know which fights y'all want to see next. Let me know who y'all want to see challenge for the title next. Y'all drop a like, hit that subscribe button. We're on the way to 1K subscribers. But yeah, let me know who y'all want to see challenge for the title, who y'all want to see fight Israel Adesanya next. Just let me know what y'all think. We out.